Hi, everybody. Welcome to our National Science Week webinar today on bee hotels with the fantastic Dr. Kit Prendergast. And I'm Doug Record. I'm the Principal of Bournda Environmental Education Centre. I've got the job of being the Zoom host today. We're joined by a couple of panellists here. Fiona Stewart, who is from the Atlas of Life Milton branch. Is that correct, Fiona?
It's Bournda Coast, Atlas.
Bournda Coast, sorry, I keep putting Milton in there. And Libby Hepburn, of course, who is the, I don't know, do you have a title, CEO of the Atlas of Life?
Whatever you like, yes.
Whatever you like. But look, welcome to all those people, all our participants out there. We hope that if you're in lockdown like everyone is, if you're in New South Wales, that you're safe and well, and that in some small way this National Science Week offering can be a bright spot for you your week. I'd just like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians. I'm speaking to you from Bournda National Park on the far south coast of New South Wales at the Bournda Environmental Education Centre. This is Dirranganj country, part of the Yuin Nation, and I extend those acknowledgements to any Aboriginal persons present today. So without any further ado from me, I'll just remind you to put your questions in chat and the Q&A tab. There will be an option at the end for your questions to be looked at, and we encourage you to do that. That's all part of the day. And I'll now hand over to Fiona to introduce our guest speaker.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks to the Bournda Centre for administering these webinars. A couple of months ago, I received an email from Shoalhaven Landcare talking about this bee hotel project, and it seemed like it fitted really well with the bushfire recovery efforts that we've got going right up and down the south coast. So I'm really pleased today to be able to introduce to you Dr. Kit Prendergast, who's the bee Babette, and I love your hat there, Kit. Kit's a zoologist and a conservation biologist, forest scholar and Curtin PhD researcher on native bees. She describes herself as a professional science writer and communicator, using a range of media to engage with both academia and the public about native bees and biodiversity and biology. She's the author of an ebook, Creating a Haven for Native Bees, and today we'll hear about her latest citizen science project, which is in conjunction with Rachel Wilson through the Australian Native Bee Association to help boost native bees post-bushfire. Kit's going to do her presentation first, and then we'll invite questions. But throughout the session, please feel free to put your questions up into chat, and then we'll deal with them. This session will run for 45 minutes. Thanks, Kit. Over to you.
Thanks for the great introduction, and hi everyone, and a special hello and condolences to people in New South Wales. I feel so privileged to be able to be speaking to you from Western Australia, where we're relatively free to go around, and my heart really goes out to you, because I would be going, well, I can't say going crazy, because you can't go crazy when you're already crazy, but crazier if I was in lockdown. So yeah, really sorry to hear about that. But while you're in lockdown, the great thing about native bees is that they are literally everywhere, especially in gardens with native vegetation. So if you want to go outside and see what's in your garden, that'd be really cool, because part of my research has been looking at native bees in urbanized areas, and we do still have native bees in cities. So that's a great thing to be looking out for. Now, today I'm going to be talking to you about a project that I designed and was fortunate enough to get funding for to help recover our native bees after bushfires. So Australia is a very fire-prone country, and unfortunately with climate change, we're having increased frequencies and intensities and severities of bushfires. And there's been a little bit of research when it comes to plant responses to fires and also fauna responses, but there's been virtually no research into how we can help our native bees recover from bushfires. And that's a major knowledge gap, because lots of our plants, they have co-evolved with our native bees, so they both need each other. And even if the plants are able to regrow in some areas, if the pollinators don't colonize those areas, then those plants, once they reach maturity, they will have flowers, but they won't set seed and they can't be restored. And on the same side, you know, native bees, we have about 2,000 species of native bees in Australia, and they're incredibly diverse and cute and have all these like weird, wacky behaviors. So they're such amazing species, and we really need to protect them. And all the focus has been on European honeybees to date, which are an introduced species, and especially after bushfires, when there's a scarcity of flowering resources, they could actually compete with our native bees. So one way that I thought we could help restore our native bees is provide them with extra nesting habitat to encourage them to nest and colonize areas that are recovering from bushfires. So native bees, they've got basically 3 nesting strategies. They nest in the ground, and those bees we think might be okay when it comes to bushfires, because if the fires go through when it's not their flight season, they're relatively insulated in the ground. Some species can dig nests as deep as 3 meters, which is just crazy. So they should be relatively sheltered from the effect of fires. But then we've got the above ground nesting bees that either nest in pithy stems of plants, or they nest in little holes in wood created by wood boring beetles. And these are ones that we think might actually be especially vulnerable to fires, including the really tense ones, because it can take years for trees to get big enough and then the beetles to colonize them and make these little holes. So we could make bee hotels to help them recover. And it's actually really easy to make bee hotels. You just get a block of wood and drill holes in it, or get some bamboo and bundle it together and put it into a container, which could be PVC pipe cut to length with the backs on it. And so those are the 2 main bee hotel designs. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the native bees that we're helping out and what the bee hotels look like, and then talk a bit more about this project. So this is my ebook, Creating a Haven for Native Bees. And if you agree to participate in this citizen science project, which involves making bee hotels and putting them up within 2 kilometers of where a fire has been, and checking them monthly, and all you have to do is just take a photo and upload it to an iNaturalist project that I created. You'll be getting this book for free. It's not usually for free, but you'll be getting it for free. And these are the native bees that we are helping. So these are mega chili bees here, and we'll also be helping the Hylaean bees. These are the ones that use the cavity nests in nature. And those are 2 wooden bee hotels there. So we've got a number of cavity nesting bees. These, you can see the little X and euro here. They nest in the pithy stems. So you can also make bee hotels by bundling together old lantana stems or old kangaroo paw stems. So those are those ones. And then what they do within your bee hotels is, they're not really hotels, they're more like nurseries. So the females, they collect nectar and pollen, and each female, so they don't live in colonies, they're solitary, and each female is both a queen and a worker and a forager all together. And so she gets the nectar and pollen, puts it in the nest, lays an egg on it, makes a little partition, and then starts again. And she makes a number of these little brood cells along the nest and then seals it up. And then the baby bees hatch out as larvae. So you can see the little white grub there, and they'll eat the nectar and pollen, grow big, molt a few times, do this massive poop, and then form a cocoon, and then either develop within a month or two, or if they're late at the end of the season, they will diapause, which means they go into suspended development, because our native bees, they're not active over the cold winter months, and then hatch out when it's warmer again. So that's the sort of life cycle there. So you got the bees having sex, making babies, and then that's a little larvae, it develops into a pupa, and then finally the adult bee. Now, these are the bee hotels, and as I mentioned, the mega chili are the ones that mainly use them. These are really cool bees. The females have pollen collecting hairs on the underside of their abdomen, which is a really good place for transferring pollen, so they're great pollinators. They really like native pea plants, so really important for the wildflower pollination. Now, unfortunately, there's some bad bee hotel designs. The ones that I'm asking you to make, as I mentioned, just a block of wood, about 10 centimeters wide, 10 centimeters high, and then about 20 centimeters deep, and drilling holes in it. Now, the hole size is really important. It needs between 2 millimeters and 10 millimeters, because our native bees are quite small. So if the holes are bigger, which you'll see the ones Mr. Fothergill's that are sold in Bunnings, they are not good bee hotel designs, because the holes are too big. And also you need quite long holes, because if it's too short, the female bees can only lay a couple of eggs, and they're more prone to parasitism. And you don't need to make them too big. If they're massive walls, this attracts predators and parasites and disease. So we really don't want that. So about 20 holes is a good number. And then there's also these ones here with the bamboo that you can see inside there. The wooden blocks, the mega chili, here's the bamboo ones. Those black and yellow bees, those are the high-laying bees. There's a Meriglossa there, and they seal their nests with a cellophane-like secretion. Then the mega chili bees, they will either seal it with resin, or they'll seal it with leaf discs. So some of them are, in the subgenus Eutrituria are known as leaf cutter bees, and then other ones will seal it with chewed up plant material. So yeah, that's basically what you'll be doing it, and then hanging it up in a tree or a fence post, and they need to be hung horizontally, and in a fairly sunny location, but not too sunny, because we don't want the babies to bake inside there, especially if you're using as a container. For example, if you're using the bamboo and putting it in a container, you don't want to use a tin container and then put it in a really hot space, because they can heat up a lot. And orient it so it's not getting too much wind, because the bees don't like the wind too much. So I also have, for this project, if you agree to participate, there is a Facebook group, and you'll be I can share information on there. I love everyone to share their thoughts and what's happening. Now, once you put the bee hotels up, the best time to put them up is basically now. So if you could start making them this month, and put them up either this month or next month, and then take a photo and upload it to the iNaturalist project at least once a month. If you want to do it more than once a month, that's totally fine. And even so, that they're being used if you see bees coming and going, and that they've finished their nest, because they'll seal it up with that secretion. Even if you find nothing using it, or even if you find non-bees using it, so sometimes wasps will use these, or any other insects, and ants can be a problem, because ants love little holes, and especially if the bees start putting nectar and pollen in them. This is all really useful information, because it will, this is the first time this has ever been trialed before. Like, I've been using bee hotels for my studies in urban areas just to look at their colonization. Overseas, they use bee hotels sort of to collect bees and then put them in agricultural fields, but they've never been used in sort of like a recovery process. And it'll be really interesting to see if the native bees can colonize these fire-affected sites. And when you take a photo with your phone, like an iPhone or a Samsung, it sort of records the GPS location. So you'll be we're putting these up on iNaturalist now. I'll be able to look at the wider landscape and see if there's any sort of landscape features that might be helping or hindering bees colonizing this, like the extent of the fires, how urbanized or how rural the area is. So it's going to be like an amazing project. We've already got, you know, people all across Australia participating, and I'm going to be doing some stuff in Western Australia. If you live in, you know, an area that's within 2 kilometres of where a fire has been, you can just put the bee hotel up in your front yard or your backyard, like put it on a fence post or a tree under eaves. If you don't live within 2 kilometres and you're able to drive to like a bushland remnant that's within 2 kilometres of where a fire has been, or walk there, then that'd be great if you could put them up and visit them and track the bee colonization. So there's the link as well to the iNaturalist project. It's called Bee Hotels to Boost Australian Bees After the Bushfires. And you can upload your photos either with the app. So there's an app for phones, and there's also, you can do it online via the website. And you sign up to iNaturalist and have an account. You can also just log in through your Facebook or your Google profile, and that can be quite useful because I always forget passwords. And then create a user profile, and then when you there's the project, so you look for projects and type in Bee Hotels to Boost Australian Bees After Bushfires, and you join that project, and I'll bring up the project here. And there's a little like thumbnail of Mega Chili Orifons using the Bee Hotels, and you click join this project. To add observations, you can again use the website or the app, and it's available for Android and Apple phones. And I find it's a bit easier to do it via the app when you're uploading observations. But yeah, you can totally take a photo with your camera and then upload it that way manually. So you log in and you open up the app, you go to your bee hotel and take a photo. You can actually either take a photo with your phone and then upload by that way, or you can, it says make an observation, and then you can directly sort of take a photo as the observation. And then you say add to project. So you join the project, so you add that photo to the project, touch the save button, make sure you touch upload so that it uploads, and you can also edit details. So if you, there's like sort of places where you can put comments. So if you've noticed maybe like lots of herby flowering things, or maybe there's lots of weeds in the environment, any, you know, extra observations would be great. And you can also add multiple photos at one time. What I'd like you to do is definitely take a photo of the whole bee hotel each month, so I can see like how many holes are used. But also if you want to take like a close-up, if you see a bee coming, you can upload that. And there's, in my book, Creating a Haven for Native Bees, there's profiles of all the sort of like main cavity nesting bees, and what they look like, and the types of hole diameters they like. So again, yeah, it's really important to use hole diameters between 2 millimeters and 10 millimeters to cater for a diversity of bees. So using a number of different hole diameters is really good, because some of our little Hylaean bees, like the Hylaeus prosopisteron, they're really small. They're like 4 millimeters long. So you can imagine they just need tiny little holes. You might even get some uroglossines using the bee hotels. Now, these are very special bees because they're the most species-rich subfamily in Australia. There's about 800 species. Some of them nest on the ground, but some of them nest in little tiny cavities. And I discovered some, like the first nesting observations of this little bee called Uroglossina purpusilla, and it nested in holes that are about 2 millimeters wide in banksia trees in bushlands. Now, at the back of my book, I've got a list of all my publications. So if you're interested in reading more about what I've published in the scientific literature about native bees and their nesting habits, or you know, the importance of native vegetation for them, then that's all available. And you can just email me at kitprendergast21@gmail.com. Also use that email address to join, say that you want to join, so that I can send you this information sheet here that I've got on my screen. I've also got an information sheet on tips and tricks for making a bee hotel. So it's amazing actually for, I don't know, maybe it's not for most people, but for me, like, drilling is actually a lot more complicated than I thought it would be. Just sort of like holding the drill, and how, you know, when you get the wood shavings stuck in it, and that sort of stuff. And I've also made some instructional videos on how to make a bee hotel, both the you know, those two main designs, the wooden block design, and the PVC pipe one. You don't have, so with the PVC pipe one, it's PVC cut to about 15 centimeters, and then you get a cap, a PVC pipe cap to put on one end, and then just stack it full of bamboo. So that's the two sort of major designs. Rather than PVC pipe, you can use, like, upcycle any sort of container as well. Now, you don't drill all the way through the wooden block, and you definitely need the back of the PVC pipe. So it's not an open tube. It's always got like a, you know, a cap at one end. So it's closed off at one end, and then the bees go in and out the same entrance. Now, when you're taking the photos, you might also find that the native bees, if they lay their eggs early in the season, so about now until, say, December, they might hatch out within that monitoring period, which is really exciting. So you'll be taking the photos every month, and you might find that 1 month it's got a cap on it, and then 2 months later you might find that it looks like something has chewed its way through that cap, and it will mean that the baby bees have developed and emerged, which is really exciting, because it's great that they're nesting, but it's even greater to show that they've nested and successfully developed and gone out. And you know, this is really important for, as I mentioned, restoring the native bee communities in these bushfire affected areas. So that's pretty much the project, and we've already got some questions. So I'll just go through and answer the ones so far. And if you have any other questions, you can put it in the Q&A or in the chat. So one of the questions, how do you get the book?
Can I just interrupt for a minute, Kit? In order to make it a little bit more interactive for people, we did on Saturday just let those people ask the questions, if you're okay with that. So I'll go to the first one with Alan. If you can unmute, Alan, if you're willing to talk. I may have put you on the spot here, but you're quite able to answer the question. Ask the question.
Firstly, I now know how to get the book. All right, that was the nature of the question. But the second one is, I have a native garden, a local one, in Canberra. I could make a bee hotel, but I'm actually interested in the moment in seeing what bees are where around this native garden, because I have some quite interesting local shrubs like Cassinias and Basserias, and I have no idea what invades those trees in terms of, I also have Femida, where you get sometimes the blue-banded bees. So I'm just interested in what sort of vegetation, I might expect to find some of these things.
Yeah, so the book, if you are participating in the Bee Hotels After Bushfires project, then you get the book. If you're not participating, then you can email me for purchasing the book. Now, the book also has a section on the best plants for our native bees. So our native bees, some of them are very specialized, and this is called a ligalectic in the scientific parlance. And it means that the bees can only forage for pollen on plants in one family. So lots of our native bees specialize on Myrtaceae. So these are the eucalypts and the callistemon and things like that. Then there's quite a few native bees that specialize on the native pea plants, the Fabaceae. So things like Dilwinia and Hardenbergia and Jacksonia, Devesia. So the types of native bees that come will depend on what's in your garden. The Amygilla, which are sometimes called blue-banded bees, but not all of them have blue bands, they're generalists, and some of them Megachilia are generalists too, so they'll visit a diversity of flora. But in my book, there's a big list of the best plants for our native bees. And if you're interested in learning more about what's potentially visiting your garden, if you're able to take photos, I have a Facebook group called Bees in the Burbs. It's not just for suburbia burbs. Like when I started this group, when I started my PhD 5 years ago, I was focusing on conserving native bees in urban areas. Now I've sort of branched out to everywhere, but people liked the alliteration, so it stayed that way. But yeah, that's that Facebook group, and you can, if you're able to take photos, I can ID them. And I also have a book, an online ebook called A Crash Course in Native Bee Taxonomy. And that is a book on how to identify native bees, the different genera. So if you want to be able to learn yourself, I've got that book. And then in the Creating a Haven for Native Bees, that's also got sort of profiles for the main cavity nesting bees. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But there's, you know, if you got one of the main findings of my PhD research, I was comparing people's gardens with bushland remnants and looking at the local and landscape factors that influenced how many native bees were there. And one of the key things was the gardens and bushland remnants, if they had a large proportion of native vegetation, they had more native bees. So if you've got a native garden, that's a really great start. So yeah, thanks. All right. Is Annie able to answer live?
Yes, I'm able to ask the question, Kit. Thanks very much for your presentation. 2,000 species of native bees, who knew? But my question is, what questions are you seeking to answer through this project, and whether, you know, you're making any comparison with areas that are unburnt and not all that close to burnt areas?
Yeah, so I personally am. So I'm going out and doing controlled impact studies. But for a citizen science project, I'm just asking people in burnt areas to put the bee hotels up there, because I've done studies in unburnt areas using bee hotels. So I know that they do use them. They definitely do use them in unburnt areas. Yeah, I'm going to be putting up lots of bee hotels across my sites. But for this project, you know, I don't want to overwhelm people as well with having to do, you know, visit lots of different sites, make lots of bee hotels. So all I'm asking, you know, the more bee, and because it's a recovery action. So the grant was through the federal government, and they had a bushfire recovery project, and their focus, what they wanted from this was community participation in recovering species in fire affected areas. So for the community, yeah, it's just burn areas within 2 kilometres of or, you know, in burn areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jane Ellick, are you able to ask your question?
Yes, okay. I'm actually keen to participate in your project, and
Awesome.
I've tried making some bee hotels, but it's as you say, the drilling's a problem, and the first thing is to get a drill bit that's long enough, because and then drilling with a long drill bit is pretty tricky. So I guess the first question is, you know, if you can only drill in about 10 centimetres, is that still going to be okay? Because that's about the length of drill bit that I can get hold of.
Yeah, so 10 centimetres, I'd say the absolute minimum length, 8 centimetres. If you can do longer, that's better. But anything shorter than 8 centimetres is getting a bit short. You can also ask your local men's shed, because they tend to have drill presses, which are really, really great. Bunnings do sell some longer drills. And as I said, if you agree to participate in this project, I've got an extra sheet with tips on drilling, as well as where you can get some like good long drill bits as well. So there's more information available for people participating in this project.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I had another question. I'm just curious. I'm actually was a retired entomologist, and so but I'm thinking about when they lay in eggs laid in a tube. The oldest eggs are at the far end of the tube. How do they manage to hatch out when the other eggs are younger near the entrance?
Yeah, so the ones near the entrance, they probably receive more sunlight, and so they tend to develop faster. They also are the males, so the females, female bees tend to be larger than males, and the female bees are also fertilized eggs. Males are unfertilized eggs, and they're also more like precious in a fitness sense. So they lay the female eggs first, and then the male eggs last. The male eggs, because they're small, like they put less nectar and pollen in, and because they're near the entrance, they develop first. I have found though, so I did like some really intensive bee hotel studies where I put in cardboard tubes and then took them out and x-rayed them and reared them in the lab. And I did find sometimes the ones in the back got stuck and died in there, and not so much because the ones at the front were too slow, is because like the ones at the front died, and then they got stuck and died in there as well. But it's not too common. But yeah, the ones at the front, the male bees also want to emerge first, so they go and get the nectar, so they're all like ready to mate when the females emerge.
Oh, yeah, very, very interesting. Thank you. I certainly haven't read that anywhere about the males and females being laid differently. Thank you.
All right, Courtney.
Hi, Kit. Thank you so much. So I actually work in the environmental field on the south coast of New South Wales. So the majority of our whole shire is bushfire impacted. So I'm wondering if there's opportunity for us to even work directly with you and even hold like a separate workshop, if you like, online, because we have over 300 land care volunteers. Some of it we've already listened to today, actually. I'm sure there'd be plenty of people who'd be keen to get involved, and just wondering if that's one option. And secondly, too, how many people would you like to be involved in certain areas?
Like the more the better, hey. So you know, if 300 people can be involved in your shire, that would be like amazing. Yeah, you can, there's no upper limit. And yeah, I would be happy to do like a you know, little presentation for you guys. I think this though is being recorded, so if you show it to the members of your shire, they'll be able to you know, have all this presentation, plus learn from other people's questions. And yeah, if you get in touch like by emailing me, I can send you those extra resources, like the videos I've made on how like I literally make a bee hotel in front of people, like, well, in front of the camera, the 2 different types, as well as the you know, information sheets and the book. But yeah, that would be absolutely wonderful if everyone could be involved. And I'm also really sorry that like most of your shire got burned. It must have been a really terrible time, and that's like, you know, really beautiful that people are, despite, you know, the tragedies to their own lives, they're also really interested in helping the great environment recover as well. So yeah, thanks.
Wonderful. We might liaise outside of this and see if we can get something happening here on the South Coast of New South Wales.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Kit, I did have someone wanting to have a look at that iNaturalist project. Now, I've actually got it open. If you finish sharing, I could just share that, and you could maybe talk people through that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I've stopped sharing, and so there's already been some people that have started, like have been recruited to this project, and they're already starting to put up their observations. So it's just the start of putting up the bee hotels and taking photos. So you can see that, which is amazing. There's already a couple of people participating, and they've uploaded their photos. And so with iNaturalist, yeah, you just take a photo, and it will record your general location. The exact location isn't, you can, like, you know, it's available there, as you can see. Now, what iNaturalist usually does is like provide an ID. But obviously, it's going to be a bee hotel. So there's no like species ID if it's just a bee hotel. But if there are things that are inhabiting it, I will ID them for you as well. So don't be, like, you've got the resources, like anyone that's participating will have my book to try and ID them, but I will also be clarifying any identifications of anything that's using it. So yeah, so this is just like someone's profile. So when you set up your profile, you can choose like a little thumbnail photo. It can be of yourself, it can be of your favorite animal, your dog who's sleeping on me at the moment.
I had that this person that I just randomly picked up. I believe that's our moderator, Fiona. Is that correct, Fiona?
Fiona's moved.
It is, and I was actually going to say we got your instructions kit for the bee hotel, and we had a little gathering to make bee hotels with about 5 or 6 people a few weeks ago, just using bamboo, and it was actually a very simple process and a really enjoyable process. And those bee hotels have been distributed out around the place, and gradually photos will be taken of them. But we started off using all sorts of recycled materials, and then came to the realization that we could actually use bamboo for everything to do with the bee hotel. So I'd really encourage people to do it. It's not difficult to do. One of the questions that I had was just some specifics about where to put them. You said in the sun and away from the wind. Is there a particular orientation, and also what height do you think they should be at?
Yeah, so they should be at about 1.5 meters high. Yeah, orientated away from getting, wind. And so the orientation, yeah. So there hasn't been enough research on orientation, which I'm hoping to use this project to help find out, like, if there's a preferred orientation. So in the sort of instructions in the iNaturalist, I would love you to actually state which orientation it's facing as well.
Okay, so you'd like people to make notes of particular things like that. Would you also like to know how close they are to a bushfire affected area and how intense the fire was?
The more information, the better. Yeah, so I can try and find that information out myself from maps and stuff, but if people are able to provide it for me without me going in and doing that, then it'd be great. So yeah, any even just any random information that anyone has. So maybe if they're it's there's lots of grass recovering after this bushfire, or the bushfire destroyed pretty much all the trees in the area. Any information will be interesting. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone?
Look, I just wanted to make a quick observation, Fiona, and that was we did an insect hotels activity here at Bournda with some stage 3 kids, year 5, 6 kids from around the Bega Valley. And I think it was the most engaging activity that we've ever done. I mean, you can imagine kids coming here and there were saws and hammers and all sorts of tools. We didn't lose any fingers, but the kids, we literally had to drag them away. They did a design process and we literally had to drag them away to have lunch and to drink water. They were so wrapped in it. And then in an environmental education sense, to take a product back to your school, which then hangs in the vegetable garden or somewhere in the school, it's just got that longevity and then that purposeful scientific observation built into it. And that's where Libby is really keen to work with us to get iNaturalist really adopted into the schools so that kids can make these daily observations and feed data to people like yourself, Kit.
Yeah, so I do bee hotel workshops with kids all the time and they absolutely love it. Like I was in Geraldton a couple of days ago doing bee hotel workshops, and if you cut up the bamboo for them, because cutting up bamboo is very hard, but if you cut up the bamboo for them and the PVC pipes, they just love, like, they find putting bamboo in containers really fun. And then with the PVC pipe, I get permanent markers or paint markers, and then they can decorate the outside and, get really creative, draw stuff on them. And it's such a good activity. And, I've done it with like kids that are like 4 years old. So there's, and then I've done it with people that are like 90 years old. So it's something that everyone in the community can get involved with. And the other thing is it's great for kids to be involved, because these bees, the females can sting. They won't sting you unless you grab one. It's very hard to grab a bee. So they're completely safe. You don't have to worry about being stung. No one's ever died from a native bee sting either, unlike honeybees. So yeah, it's a really great activity for kids and like schools in bushfire affected areas.
Thanks, Kit. Are there any other questions from people attending? No. Okay. I'd like to thank you very much, Kit, for the presentation today. It's been fantastic. And as I said, our experience in making bee hotels, it was just great fun. There's so much potential for this project to get lots and lots of people involved. And I'd really encourage people to sign up for the project. And the upside is that you get the wonderful book with lots of information about it. And we'll learn a lot. I mean, as you said, Kit, we don't know enough about what's happening with native bees, particularly in a post-fire environment, but I suspect more generally as well. I'd just like to put a plug in for iNaturalist. On the south coast of New South Wales, we've got the Atlas of Life in the Coastal Wilderness, and we've got, which covers from Moruya down to the Victorian border, and our own project with the project that I'm representing, which is Bournda Coast, which covers from the Shoalhaven and down to Moruya. So quite substantial areas of that overall area were burnt in the most recent bushfires. So a lot of people are involved in bushfire recovery projects, land care, local land services, and all sorts of others are all working on bushfire recovery projects. And it just seems to me that this is a really critical part of it. So I'd really encourage anyone listening, certainly on the South Coast, to join in with the work that we're doing and to work towards thinking about how we can promote it, how we can get people making bee hotels, and how we can then record progress over the next 12 months to see, what we can learn from it. So thank you very much, Kit. It's been a fantastic session.
And where can we get the hypnotic antennae?
A friend actually made these for me, so yeah, they are one of a kind, I suppose.
I know my sister-in-law's two granddaughters are going to watch this recording, and they'll be captivated. Well, one last thing, Fiona and Libby, I just needed to say was that look, we're pretty new to this webinar thing, but I have posted a survey from Inspiring Australia, New South Wales. Jackie Randall's the manager there, is really keen to get all the participants to fill in that space so they get data on not just today, but Science Week generally, who's going to what and doing what. So if you, when the meeting ends, you should go to a screen in your browser with that survey if it works the way it's intended. But you don't get it, if someone can email me and just let me know, I'll email that survey out to you. But thank you very much to everyone. And we've got another meeting, a Zoom meeting starting in 5 minutes, a celebration of the Atlas. So we're going to end this meeting very quickly and then move on to that other activity. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is where I pull the plug. It always seems a little bit rude, but anyway.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thanks, Doug. Bye.